Hello and welcome to Spread Book Joy. Today I want to talk to you about Felix Love by Kacen Callender. If you're new to the channel, I'm Jack. I'm a qualified primary school teacher who shares great books for children for home or school. I share picture books, middle grade, and today YA fiction, so young adult fiction. So this is Felix Ever After by Kacen Callender, and I would advise it for children or young adults, I should say, of 16 plus. There are references to sex and drugs, homophobia and transphobia in this book. So pre-warned, they're not spoilery warnings, they're content warnings, and this is a YA trans love story. Felix Love is a 17-year-old trans boy who is in his final year of a prestigious art school, private art high school in New York. And Felix has got a number of issues. First of all, Felix is quite confused about his identity. He came out as a trans boy within the few years before this book is set, has transitioned, and his father, who he lives with because his mum has left them, still refuses to call Felix by his chosen name. Even though his father has been seemingly supportive of Felix's transition, he still refuses to call Felix by his chosen name, and very occasionally still says he'll always be his little girl. So Felix is really angry at his father for failing to accept who he is. But internally, Felix is also struggling with his own identity. He doesn't always feel like a boy. So having declared himself to be a boy, he's now struggling because he doesn't always feel like one. So Felix has got a number of identity issues going on. And identity is a fluid thing, right? Our identities change and grow as we get older, and teenagers in particular are always constantly seeking to find out who they are and who they want to be. He wants to get into Brown University, and Felix is not rich. So Felix and his father, father's a single parent family, and Felix's father works all sorts of hours just to pay for Felix's tuition, but they're not rich. And he's surrounded by quite privileged children at this private school. His best friend Ezra, who I loved as a character, is from an extremely rich family. So there's a scholarship for Brown University that Felix is going for, and there's another student called Declan who Felix cannot stand because he's Ezra's ex-boyfriend, and Declan is going for this same scholarship, and Felix can't understand. He's like, why is he going for this? He's rich, he doesn't need it, why does he have to be going for it? And they're constantly at loggerheads together. Felix also writes really in-depth emails which are featured throughout the book to his absentee mother, who has left a number of years ago and still hasn't been in contact with Felix or his father. So Felix, quite understandably, at this tumultuous period in his life as a teenager and then as a trans teenager, is taking this to heart. He writes hundreds of emails to his mother, and it's in these emails that he really opens up about his true feelings, and he doesn't talk to anyone about these true feelings really, not even his best friend Ezra. So he doesn't send the emails, but he often thinks one day he'll just send all these hundreds of emails to his mother, but he never does, as we meet him in this book. So what with worrying about college, worrying about finding love, and writing these hundreds of emails to his absentee mother, and being annoyed at his father for his lack of, and worrying about his own identity and who he actually is, Felix has a lot going on. And then something happens. So Felix is at this art school, and they go in one day, and someone has found pictures of Felix before he transitioned and posted them all over the lobby in the school, along with Felix's dead name, so the name that he had before he became Felix. And that is absolutely devastating. It's very transphobic hate crime, really, a real act of aggression. And Felix is devastated and looking around at everybody in his school and wondering who hates him that much. Who in his school is a transphobe? Who hates him that much to do that to him? So he hatches a plan, and it's a revenge plan. Felix decides he's going to catfish whoever it is, and he's got some ideas of who it might be. And he allows his judgment of other people to cloud him here. Instead of thinking about the evidence, he allows his feelings to cloud his judgment on this issue. So Felix has decided he's going to befriend the person he thinks it is under a false Instagram profile, and he's going to get them to confess to some things in their lives, and then he's going to share it with the entire school. So initially this revenge storyline made me struggle to warm to the character of Felix somewhat. Plus all of the cultural references, getting my head inside the mind of a teenager in New York in this day and age when I'm like, 25 years older than most of these characters. I found it tricky, but then I'm not the target audience, and I didn't read it because I was the target audience. I read it because I thought it would be a good YA book to recommend. And actually, once I got past the initial what's going on with the different characters, and got there are quite a lot of characters introduced at once, quite a lot of information thrown at us at once, but once I got into it, it was fine. And also Felix's reaction, the revenge storyline, became very much a key part of his growing and changing as a character. So it's understandable that a teenager would react in the way that Felix did. What I remember being a teenager, and I remember the extremes of emotion that you feel. What I obviously cannot truly fathom is the experience of transphobia, which this book is trying to get across to me. And actually, so Felix has been a victim of a transphobic attack, and I can't understand what that's like. So I found Felix to be initially a very judgmental character. He worries all the time about how he is perceived and about people not accepting who he is, but yet Felix spends a lot of his time making snap judgments about people. But that is all dealt with in the book, and I'm pleased to say that actually that's a big part of Felix's character development and growth. So as Felix grows and as he changes, he learns a lot of lessons and the consequences of his actions and his behaviour. Felix learns that he's not the only person who struggles with his identity. He's not the only person who isn't privileged at the school, even though he perceives them all to be. And then he realises that all the people that he sees around him who he thinks judge him for this or that, they see him in a different way from the way he thinks they do. And actually, what's going on with Felix and his struggle to figure out whether he is a boy or not a boy, and what his gender identity is, and as he realizes that he hasn't accepted who he is yet, and that he needs to accept himself, and he needs to love himself before he's going to be worthy of love. And that's kind of the premise of this book, and that's kind of the main theme, the main message that I took from this book. So I really felt sad to leave Felix behind at the end, because I really grew to love him as a character. But my favourite character in the whole thing was Ezra, Felix's best friend. And Ezra raises Felix up all the time and makes him say, don't apologise for who you are. And he strives so that Felix doesn't accept any of the seemingly minor transgressions against him and his identity that people seem to make all the time. And he reminds him, it's like, you don't have to apologise for who you are. Like at one point there was a really good conversation where Felix is saying, I put my dad through a lot. And Ezra stops and says, just stop there. You didn't put your dad through anything. Let's carry on with the story. So he's continually reminding Felix and raising Felix up and empowering Felix. And I loved Ezra as a character. I just thought he was wonderful. And he teaches Felix a lot in this book. So the author Kacen Callender is a trans-masculine non-binary person, and they discovered their identity in their 20s after watching an episode of Degrassi Junior High. I think it was like Degrassi The Next Generation, not the one that I grew up with, because wow, that would have been progressive. But they watched this episode and it made them realise that all the struggles they've had with their assigned identity at birth, their assigned gender identity at birth, were real, that it wasn't just in their mind, and it helped them discover who they were and discover that all the different facets of gender that there are out there. And they wanted to write this book for any teenagers out there who felt like they did and were struggling with their identity. And this also manages to be very educational about trans issues without interrupting the narrative. So the narrative flow of the story is really good. Felix is wrestling with all these personal issues about being trans, and then all of the societal issues about being trans, and we learn about the very low life expectancy of trans people of colour, because Felix is black and queer and trans. So we learn about the trans women who started the Stonewall riots and how that trans people have been marginalised within the LGBTQIA plus community. So it's a really educational read, but in a very well written, natural way. And I would recommend it for anyone age 16 plus. I just thought it was a really good love story at the end as well. I was really hooked to find out who Felix would end up with, because there's a love triangle, which isn't a spoiler, it's actually on the blurb at the back. And just look at this cover. I absolutely love this. I mean, it popped out to me. Like, this is one of the books that I bought when I went to Waterstones, and this just like, I just went, whoa, straight to this cover. When I went to Waterstones a few months ago, and I'll pop a card up so you can watch that book haul that I did. This was one of the books that I chose because I was determined to pick out books that I hadn't heard of on Bookstagram or Booktube, and that I hadn't intended to buy, but that the bookshop browsing brought me to. And this was one of them, and I'm glad to say it was a really successful read for me. Oh, and by the way, the cover art is by an artist called Alex Cabal, and I will link their Instagram in my description box below, because wow, I started following them and the artwork is amazing. So if you've got any comments, if you think this sounds interesting, if you've read it, I'd love to hear about it. Please leave a comment below and let's get into the chat about it. And if you like this video, please consider clicking like and subscribing to my channel if you're not already subscribed, and hopefully I'll see you again here soon. Bye.